Okay, we currently have 36, 37 people. One more join now. I still got some people trickling in. I want to thank everybody for being here today. When you do join, you will be automatically muted. There will be many opportunities to speak though, and you do have control of your microphone, so you are able to unmute yourself if you would like to speak. You just keep that in mind, that when you do go to speak, you'll need to unmute. Okay, it looks like we've got a little bit slower of the trickling in here. I would like to go ahead and get started. Got one more joining now. I'm going to stop sharing this screen so we can have introductions. Again, thank you everyone for being here. The PAC hasn't met in a few years. It's nice to see everyone's faces right now. I did put a message in the chat just to remind you, if you haven't heard me mention it, you are automatically muted when you come onto the meeting. We will have somewhat informal opportunities for you to speak. Just remember that you will need to unmute yourself when you go to talk. This is the State Water Board Public Advisory Committee meeting, otherwise known as the PAC. Today we are here to go over a little bit of a change in project direction. Those of you that may be more familiar with GAMA will know what I'm speaking of. I will go over some background slides of the program, and Miranda from USGS will also go into more of the details of what we're speaking of. We're going to start off by introducing the PAC members that have joined us today. I'm going to go ahead and call off the PAC members I have on the list. If you are, I will, at the end of calling these members, if you are here as a representative substituting for that PAC member, please just let me know at the end when I do request that. When you do introduce yourself, it would just be great to know, we got a PAC member joining right now. For those PAC members, when I do call on you, it would be great if you could unmute and show yourself while you do introduce yourself. Just state where you're from and if you have been on the GAMA PAC for a while, or if this is a new appointment for you. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Dory Bellin. I'm a geologist with the GAMA program. I can serve as the liaison to the USGS and other parties that we have that we work with to implement the GAMA program, like Lawrence Livermore National Labs, UC Davis, California State University East Bay, and of course the Sigma groups that we work with as well in those programs. I will be kind of your host of this meeting, and as I've mentioned before, you are automatically muted. If you do want to speak, we would love to see you. If you could turn on your video, and also remind yourself that you will need to unmute yourself for us to hear you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with the PAC members. If you don't mind introducing yourselves, if this person is here or the representative, please chime in. David Albright, Kim Taylor, Jason Gerdak.
Hi, this is Vanessa De La Piedra with Valley Water. I'm the Groundwater Management Unit Manager, and I'm here today for Jason Gerdak, who's on vacation.
Perfect. Thank you, Vanessa. Next person. Well, I know you've retired, Roger, but would you like to introduce yourself? We can move on. Mark Stelos.
Yes, this is Roger Sherrill. I'm past general manager of Rio Alto Water District, retired now and enjoying doing other things, but still always interested in the GAMA program. I was an original PAC member when it was first started.
Thank you, Roger. Is Mark here?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Silos. I'm the new Water Resources Manager at the South Tahoe Public Utility District, and I'm taking over on the Gamma PAC for a previous staff member who retired here. So this is my first meeting, and happy to be here and to meet all you.
Thank you, Mark. Peter? Adam Hutchinson? Heather Lucas?
Hi, I'm John Erickson with Community Water Center, our technical director, and I'm stepping in today for Heather Lucas, who couldn't make it.
Thank you, John. I don't want to butcher your name. Gadu Atume?
No worries. Good morning, everyone. My name is Godo Atsume. I work with Clean Water Action. I'm replacing Jennifer Clary, who was in this position previously. To be here.
Thank you, Gadu. I appreciate you being here. Paul?
I am Paul Smokler, and I've actually been on the committee quite a while, originally appointed by the CMTA, and then subsequently in my status as either just working and being an environmental professional for over 40 years, and now I'm retired and sometimes teach at Cal State Channel Islands.
Great, we're glad you can be here. Thank you, Paul. Alex?
Hey guys, my name is Alex Beering. I am new to the Gamma PAC and I work for California Farm Bureau. I'm actually still new to the California Farm Bureau, having only been here about 2 months, but I am their senior policy advocate who is focused on water. Prior to that, I was the government affairs and communications manager for Friant Water Authority, based here in Sacramento, but they're in the San Joaquin Valley. And before that, I was environmental consultant. So I've been around for a bit, been on water stuff, but this is new to me. And I'm replacing Danny Merkley, who is now doing his own thing.
Perfect. We really appreciate you being here. Danny was a longtime member as well.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alex. Kevin? From Western States? All right, and last but not least, Gail.
Good morning, Gail Dillahunt with Western Growers Association, and I've been on the PAC for quite a while. Still doing water and still working for Western Growers.
Thank you so much, Gail. You've also been a very good supporter of the Gamma program, so we appreciate you being here today. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and introduce some management here at the State Water Board, and then we'll move over to introducing USGS representatives that are here. Aaron Button is my supervisor. He is the new chief of the Gamma program. Aaron, if you just want to introduce yourself real quickly.
Yeah, great. No, thanks, Dory. And so my name's Aaron, and I appreciate the introduction. I'm the Gamma manager here, and just to reiterate, we really appreciate you guys' time and look forward to hearing from you. And so thank you.
And Janice and Annalisa, feel free to introduce yourselves if you'd like.
Janice Sinke here, State Water Board, Division of Water Quality. I oversee our groundwater monitoring unit, which includes our 2 oil and gas programs and Gamma. And I'll toss it over to Annalisa.
Hi, good morning. I am the Assistant Deputy Director and Water Quality.
Hi, Annalisa. Thank you very much. And you are a little muddled. I don't know if that was anybody else's experience, but it was a little difficult to hear you. We have USGS here to speak. Just to give a quick introduction, Miranda, if you would like to say something, and Kim and Anka as well.
Hi, I'm Miranda Fram, and I'm the program chief at the USGS for the Gamma Priority Basin Project.
Thank you, Miranda.
And hi, I'm Anke Müller-Solger. I became the director of the California Water Science Center on February 27th of this year. So that means that I'm now basically responsible ultimately for the work that the USGS does with Gamma and the Gamma Priority Basin Project. So thanks for having me here as well. Kim Taylor couldn't make it today.
Okay. Did Ryan, was he able to make it today? From USGS?
We've got a lot of people from USGS. I don't know if we want to, it'll take a long time to do the whole team.
No, your new director, or that was an ANCO's position.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we do have an acting. I've been with the center since 2014 as the associate director for projects, and we currently have an acting person in that position, and he couldn't make it. His name is Ryan Banta.
Okay.
So
perfect.
Thanks for asking that, Dory. Sorry, I should have let you know.
No, it's okay. All right, thank you guys. We're gonna go ahead and if you were late to joining, we are here to meet with our advisory committee, also known as our PAC. Everyone is welcome though. This is a public meeting. If you have comments, we will have plenty of opportunity for you to provide those, and we do invite them. The purpose of today's meeting, if you hadn't taken the survey, survey is a good idea of kind of how our conversation is going to be led today. We are going to be speaking of what we've done in the Gamma program, kind of what we accomplished and our objectives in the first 2 decadal phases, and where we're kind of going from here. And USGS will go into detail about some example projects and ways that we can move forward. I'm going to open up the meeting by giving a little background information. Aaron, if you wanted to mention anything else about the Gamma program before I get started, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, I'll just get started.
Yeah, no, great. No, just to reiterate, we really look forward to this opportunity to get feedback. Dory said it real well, and I agree 100%. So yeah, thanks guys for attending, and we look forward to hearing from you guys. Go for it.
All right, thanks, Aaron. And we are recording this meeting just to give everyone a reminder. You are automatically muted if you want to speak. Feel free to turn on your video, but you will have to unmute yourself so we can hear you. Okay, but I'll go ahead and get started here. Share my screen with my presentation. Excuse me. So, as you know, we're here for the PAC meeting today. Thank you very much for being here. We are going to go over some background about the program. We are going to kind of go over the status of the program now, the results of the survey, and then USGS will kind of take over from there, going into more of the detail that I had previously discussed. So to start with our program overview, we started the Gamma program back in 2000. Actually, we had an early version of the Gamma program that was established once the legislature was learning more about MTBE in our groundwater, understanding that groundwater as a source for drinking water could be affected by these contaminants that were anthropogenic. So with the Budget Act of 2000, we were mandated to start somewhat of a groundwater quality monitoring program, but it wasn't until 2001 with the AB 599 that was called the California Groundwater Monitoring Act of 2001 that really established what the mandates would be and reflects what the program is that we have going today. We have several parts of the Gamma program and I'll go over, but mainly we'll be speaking today about the Priority Basin Project, which is one of the components of the Gamma program. So in AB 599, we basically had 2 mandates. We needed to create a groundwater monitoring program and then increase the availability of this information that we collect and what we know about groundwater contamination to the public. Within this mandate, we had to create an interagency task force, which is basically a bunch of state and federal workers that would work closely with the program, but then they would have an advisory committee that would say, this is what the framework of the program should be. At that time, we were an unfunded mandate, so we didn't have any money that was given to us from the legislature, but a PAC member or 2 were very close with Prop 50 at the time in 2003, and were able to get us $50 million for the first decade of our sampling program. So to begin, the USGS was our technical lead at the time. They designed a framework report and they prioritized the groundwater basins assigned in Bulletin 118 from DWR. You'll see there on the right is a map of the actual sampling prioritization of these basins that was outlined in this framework report. You'll find the framework report on either one of the State Water Board or the USGS websites. On the left, kind of covered up there with my text, because it's not very important, but it's the title page, cover page of our blue report we call. It is our report to the legislature, where we basically accepted the USGS plan and explained to the legislature how we were going to develop the GAMA program and implement the projects within it. So I mentioned the two goals. They were to improve the statewide comprehensive groundwater quality monitoring in the state, and then increase that information and availability to the public. Obviously, there are many benefits to the program. This is a basin-wide scale sampling program. We sample on a grid network, so it's statistically an unbiased sampling grid. We are characterizing chemicals of concern and any anthropogenic or natural occurring contaminants on a basin scale in ambient groundwater that can affect our source for drinking water purposes. Obviously, the benefits then would to be increasing the knowledge of these chemicals that are in our groundwater, provide all of this information to the public with accessible tools and reports and other ways to convey this information. And then obviously another benefit would be to help the decision makers manage and protect our groundwater resources. I mentioned how we began funding with this program. So for the first decade, which we are calling 2003 to 2013, we had approximately $5 million per year to implement everything in the GAMA program. When this expired in 2013, we were amidst a drought. I don't know if a lot of you recall, but there was some emergency funding that was given to us from the governor because we only had the 1.3 million per year that was given to us from the Waste Discharge Permit Fund. That drought bill and the subsequent water action plan the next fiscal year made up our new $3 million allocation that we would receive in addition to the 1.3 from that Waste Discharge Permit Fund. So our funding has remained the same since that first fiscal year of 2015 and 2016, of receiving that 4.33 million per year. I'm going to go over the many components of the GAMA program. So this full amount wasn't used for just what we did with the USGS. It does fund other projects. But with some inflation changes that, as everybody has experienced, both professionally and personally, we are running into a little bit of a challenge with our scopes of work. So going into the actual GAMA program, we have several components. The Priority Basin Project is what we're mainly going to speak of today, and that's what we implement through contracts with the USGS. We also have our domestic well projects, special studies, our information system, which we now call the GAMA GIS. Those that have been with us longer know it as GeoTracker GAMA. And then, of course, providing some kind of hydrogeological technical assistance. So first, going over what we're here to speak of today is the Priority Basin Project. That first decadal phase was to assess the groundwater that was accessed by public supply wells for drinking water purposes. So sometimes we call this the deeper phase, but this is where we first started. We had 35 study units that were made up of different conglomerates of groundwater basins, and then some other areas outside those basins for low use purposes. We also implemented a trend monitoring program. That frequency has changed a little bit over the years, but on average, we go back and revisit 20% of the wells that were first sampled, and then we go back every 5 years. So it's it's part of the design and the framework of that initial design of the program to go back and see those changes through time. Our second decadal phase, which started in 2013, amidst our drought and our new funding, we wanted to meet with the PAC and say, how would you like to move forward? And the way we would like to move forward at that time was to learn more about domestic and small system wells. This is obviously a huge data gap in the state of California because those wells are not regulated. And knowing our shallow aquifer resource for drinking water purposes is extremely important for many years, or for many reasons. Mainly because One, it's accessed by people that may not necessarily understand groundwater quality and how that affects them. But we also have other warning systems, I guess you could say. Contamination, anthropogenic especially, is going to hit that shallow aquifer resource first. So at this time, USGS did prioritize groundwater units. And so groundwater units were designed in order for us to cover more of the state, knowing that a lot of the domestic and small system wells were outside of groundwater basins. So groundwater units consist of the actual basins and then those upland portions from those basins. Those areas were prioritized based upon use. I mean, domestic and small systems were in that area. And then just like with the first phase, conglomerates of those different units were used to develop study units. Looking at the Gamma Groundwater Information System, that is another component that's obviously reaching our other goal of the mandate within AB 599 that started our program, was to get this information to the public. So on this kind of Google-based map, we have a publicly accessible platform for people to access over 83 million analytical records from over 300,000 wells in the state. This is not just Gamma information from our program, but this is groundwater quality information from a lot of different data sets. For example, CDPH, which now turns into a division of drinking water, all of their public supply well data. We have all of DWR's data in here as well, NWIS from the USGS, and many, many other agencies. That this data is all standardized in the system, so the user is able to query across all of these data sets simultaneously. We also have many different analytical tools and reporting features that you can access, and all of these queries are interactive on our website. Another component, which is smaller but not less important, is our special studies project. This is designed to take very special, specific groundwater topics and to investigate those. So, for example, we have worked with CSU East Bay, Lawrence Livermore National Labs, and UC Davis to implement a lot of these special studies projects. Now, the USGS does actually, complete a lot of the same studies with the Party Basin Project, but this would be on a more narrow, not basin-wide, but more narrow scale, for example, studies throughout the state. We've looked at nitrate source and transport, non-point source, wastewater indicators, groundwater age, which I think is one of the unique features of the Gamma program. And of course, there are isotopic studies that look at source and recharge information. We did have a domestic well project component of the Gamma program, and this is where the Gamma staff actually went out and sampled wells. This is before we had that shallow aquifer second phase of the Gamma Party Basin project. And this was very different than what we're doing with the USGS. This was based upon our staff sending out brochures to all of the people that we knew that had domestic wells in that county, not the basin. And then if we sampled that well, it was based upon their response of wanting to participate. So this wasn't a grid-based, this was survey-based response. And but it did provide these results to the user free of charge. It also provided a lot of education to the user about if any contaminants did exist in their water well. And of course, this is all voluntary, and all of this data went into our system. And last but not least, Gamma staff do provide some hydrogeologic technical assistance. This could be to programs within our division or outside our division. Examples of these projects would be recycled water, desal projects, groundwater monitoring, and GIS analytical work. We have a lot of information that we've produced, a lot of data that we've produced from these first two phases of the Party Basin project. Both the State Water Board and the Gamma websites have a plethora of information, from our first reports that were published for each study unit to tools that you can access to look at our trends data, to look at how to download our data from our different websites. We have an online tools page on the Gamma website, and those online tools from the Gamma project or from the USGS are also available on their website. A lot of background information. We are now starting some video tutorials on how to use the Gamma GIS, and we'll be releasing more in the future. This is an example of the online tools webpage. As you can see, when you do go to that page, you'll see a long list of tools, not only created from the Gamma staff at the Water Board, but also from the USGS. So let's go over our survey results. Yes.
Sorry, real quick. There was a question in the chat.
Yeah,
the question is, what contaminants did the domestic well project test for?
I'll respond to that in the chat.
Okay.
Was that the domestic well project that we did, or the actual Priority Basin's shallow aquifer project? Is it state?
This was the state, yes.
That we did with the state. Okay. The domestic well project was mainly based upon Title 22 constituents. They we did have DVCP in areas where we felt like that was a known contaminant. Of course, nitrate, our normal metals, our inorganics, major, minor ions, but we didn't really go into many VOCs. It wasn't an expanded list like you would see with the USGS sampling.
Thank you.
So our first question in the survey, and please interrupt me anytime. The first question in the survey was, how do you prioritize a focus for the next decadal phase? We've gone from looking at the deeper aquifer, or the use for public supply. We then moved the next 10 years for the shallow supply or shallow resource. Of course, this depth changes with where you are in the state, but it's where these domestic and state smells were accessing the groundwater. And now we're into our third decade. How do you see us focusing this next phase? Top answers for this were to assess the sources and processes driving groundwater quality change. And when we did give some example projects of what that would look like, understanding the drivers of changing recharge quality. So recharge is a huge topic today in groundwater. And then continuing the trends components for the domestic well, that second phase, the shallow phase of our program in the Priority Basin project. Those were our top answers for that question. Additional suggestions for these focus questions did kind of run the gamut. How do we measure the role of the vadostone loading on recharge water quality? What is the impact of concentrated versus diffuse discharge on water quality? Of course, wishing that we would coordinate efforts with GSAs and aid GSAs with their limited financing and any of those that do serve those disadvantaged communities. Understanding the drivers of changing recharge quality, linking nitrate loading to nitrate trends, especially how this relates to CV salts and our irrigated lands regulatory programs. Understanding how water availability affects water quality, especially on the Central Coast. Evaluating if that trend analysis is representative of all wells in a geographic area. I mentioned we go back for the trends component for just a portion of those wells that were initially sampled for that baseline assessment, and identifying those tipping points and risks associated with the thresholds. Our next question, get my little toolbar out of the way. Ranking of the three focus questions. What are your top three? What are the sources and processes driving groundwater quality trends? What are the drivers of changing recharge quality? And how long does it take for these changes to show up in drinking water? Of course, we're all going to discuss all of these results in more detail, but I just want to give you all of the results here. Ranking other types of data in order of importance. Our top three answers of how we can, or what we should collect in the Priority Basin project: water levels, collection of data, and or development of methods, time series analysis and mapping, use of geophysical data, like our airborne surveys we're seeing used by a lot of different agencies now, our electrical resistivity imaging that is also used, for example, in their salinity mapping. Got two people I've got to admit here. And then our last ranking of other types of data, compilation of geographical information system, or otherwise known as GIS, feature data sets, soils, climate, land use, etc. Ranking focus studies in order of importance, using geochemical tracers to quantify risks to water quality and water supply, Water use can cause changes in groundwater quality, for example, recharge, dissolution from precipitation of minerals. Groundwater pumping may change the mixture of water captured by a well, pulling water from the shallower, deeper zones. They may have different water quality, using predictive spatial modeling to produce 3D maps of concentrations of constituents, augmenting current efforts done by SAFER in CV salts, and using geochemical methods for identifying sources of salinity to groundwater to augment efforts by CV salts and the salt nutrient management plan. Top most effective tools for communicating what we find in the GAMA program. Our top answer was story maps and one-page fact sheets. We also have websites that are just as equal. So it's very interesting to see these kind of as an even playing field for all of our results. Public press releases, 0, and public presentations, 5. So this is good to hear because we are working on all of the ways that we do communicate this information. Additional suggested data products for effectively communicating. So any others that you see than those that were asked in that question. Social media and video. Work with local agencies to communicate to stakeholders. Detailed reports, something that can be used in GSPs and online tools. Water quality reports with detail. Water quality reports, oh goodness gracious, that's repeated, I'm sorry. And the dashboard similar to the Groundwater Live site. Ranking the most important constituents for the GAMA program, the Priority Basin Project, to analyze. Nitrate comes in first. Emerging contaminants, of course, geochemical tracers. That's, for example, our isotopic tracers, groundwater age and noble gases. Organics that may not be regulated. Emerging pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and these would be testing at very low detection levels. Then comes TDS and major ions, and then our radionuclides. So this question has to do with seeing the transport of contaminants. How long does it take? How important is it for the GAMA program to focus at this timeline? We have important and somewhat important coming in as equal results. And then here's this open question. What is the big unanswered questions facing stakeholders concerned about groundwater quality? To just give you, I want to make sure you guys saw all of these answers, but I won't necessarily read them all here, but we had a really great response to this question. The role of the vadose zone in groundwater contamination, as we've discussed earlier. The long-term effects of groundwater contamination from ag, PFAS compounds. How does groundwater recharge affect groundwater quality? That's come up repeatedly. Impacts from waterborne contaminants compared with the exposure via other pathways. Necessarily hasn't been a concentration of the GAMA program, but wasn't answered here. Remediation, access to our on-site wastewater treatment system policies. If the impact to the shallow groundwater or drinking water quality is being effectively monitored, those policies that are being implemented. Black swans in groundwater quality, how long it takes to restore groundwater impacted by salts and nutrients. So this was a great response to this question, and we'll be going over these a little bit more in detail. So that is all of the survey questions. I'm going to be just giving you an opening here to the USGS. What we have so far is the first and second decadal phases, to kind of summarize what I've spoken of this morning. We assessed ambient groundwater quality on a basin-wide scale. We've collected, and this is for our drinking water source of groundwater. We've collected a large amount of data. We've done a lot of trends, and our funding is remaining steady. We do have some challenges with inflation and costs to our work scope, so we do need to sometimes limit our scope of work as we move forward. But we have a lot of new groundwater legislation and permit requirements with a lot of people, especially PAC members that may be fee payers here. And we need to provide work that necessarily isn't redundant in our sampling and is accessible for everyone to access information that we're collecting with the GAMA program. We are still legislatively mandated to reach those two goals that I've mentioned before, to have our ambient groundwater quality monitoring program and to make this information available to the public. And we feel that allocating our funding to continue the trends component, but turn down the baseline sampling a bit and look at the actual drivers that are affecting groundwater quality still fits that mandate. And that's what we'll be discussing today. So next up is the USGS. Before Miranda speaks, I believe someone else like Anka wanted to mention a few things. So I will give the floor to her. Please continue. Right now though, I'd like to pause. If anybody would like to interject, they can unmute themselves. If you do have any questions about what I just went over, we'll have plenty of other opportunities to speak, especially as we start discussing this more in detail. But I want to give that opportunity now if anybody has any questions. Okay, great. Anka, if you would like to provide I will stop sharing and Anka will provide a little introduction to the USGS talk.
Yeah, really through Miranda. But as I mentioned, oops, am I? Yeah, I'm unmuted, right? Good. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Anka Miller-Solger, and I only recently became the director of the USGS California Water Science Center, which again, that means that ultimately I'm now responsible for the USGS GAMA Priority Basin Project work. But luckily for me, and really for all of us, the GAMA Priority Basin Project is currently in what I think are extremely capable hands, and those are the hands of Dr. Miranda Fram, who you'll be hearing from next. So for those of you who haven't met Miranda, she has been with the USGS since 1997, a lot longer than me, for example, and joined the GAMA Priority Basin Project in 2006, and then took over as GAMA Priority Basin Project chief when Ken Belitz, who had started this, left our center in late 2012. So for me, as a much newer arrival to all of this, I really like the phased setup of this project and the collaborative shaping of each phase of this project by the Water Board, our USGS team, but also really importantly, the Public Advisory Committee, as well as members of the public. So now at the end of this phase 2 and the beginning of phase 3, I think we're in a really critical and also, in my opinion, really exciting time when we all work together, and that's what we're doing here today, to shape phase 3. So it's the most successful and useful that it can be. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion about all of this that's following Miranda's presentation, although unfortunately I have to say that I can't stay here for the entire discussion because I have another commitment. But Miranda will of course be here, as will members of her team, and I'll definitely watch the recording of what I'm going to be missing. So because I really think this is super important for the future of this next phase of GAMA. So with that, I'll now turn it over to Miranda Fram, to give you an overview of 20 years of GAMA Priority Basin project results, and also the emerging priorities for this next phase, phase 3. So thanks for having us. And I'm really, really excited about all of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you for that introduction, Anka. I will now share my screen. And there we go. So as Anka said, I'm the USGS project chief for the Priority Basin Project and have been in this position since 2012. And what I'd like to do today is to give you a very quick tour of what we've been doing for the last 20 years and open the discussion on the priorities for the next phase. So before I dive into that, a few quick acknowledgements. First and foremost, the State Water Board. This is a State Water Board program, and it's been a great honor for the USGS to be able to work with the Water Board on this for the last 20 years, and we look forward to continuing in the future. A small but important amount of funding comes from the USGS from cooperative matching funds. And I'd like to acknowledge the large team of people at the USGS working on the project. I've listed the project leadership here, and big thank you to the rest of the US team who's out there every day collecting samples, managing data, writing reports, and making the project run. All right, so as Dory explained, the project has proceeded in 3 phases: public supply in phase 1, domestic supply in phase 2, and now phase 3 that we're discussing today. And at each one of the transitions from phases, we've had PAC meetings to discuss the priorities for the next phase, to essentially vet the plans through the PAC and figure out what to do. We've also had PAC meetings when we've had course changes during the phases. So those of you who've been on the PAC for a while, you heard from me in 2018, previously in 2013, and now here we are in 2023. For the first part, where I'm going to talk about the 20 years of results compressed into 15 minutes, everything I'm going to say is on the new website that we released about 1.5 years ago now, and I encourage you to visit it. The new website is one of the outcomes from the last PAC meeting, when the feedback we received was we need to do more to make sure that our information is available and accessible and explained in many different ways for many different audiences. So that's what we've done on the website. Please take a look, send us comments. So the first phase, Story said the big question was, what is the quality of groundwater used for public supply? And we went through a prioritization process to figure out where to look, and then created a statewide design that was based on a statistical sampling to get a representative sampling of the resource used for public supply. It's a grid-based sampling, lay down a grid, sample 1 well per grid. Between 2004 and 2012, we proceeded to assess 90% of the resource used for public supply, sampling 2,400 wells in 35 study units, and answered the question. So we answered the question by quantifying the proportion of the resource with concentrations above water quality benchmarks at study unit and statewide scales. So for the phase 1, the benchmarks, well, many of you have probably seen our pie diagram fact sheets, where the pie diagram, in this case, this is for the Madera-Chowchilla Basin in the San Joaquin Valley, shows the proportion of the public supply resource with high, moderate, and low concentrations of inorganic and organic constituents. This with relative to benchmarks with health-based thresholds. In phase 1, it was all health-based benchmarks. In phase 2, in response to feedback from the PAC, we've separated out the regulatory and the non-regulatory. But anyway, the results at the study unit level are rolled up to a statewide level, and the capstone report for the paper for the project, Bellitz et al., was published in 2015. For the second phase, the status of groundwater used for domestic supply, we used a different prioritization based on the locations of where there are domestic wells, came up with a prioritization, and in 2012 through 2024, we're marching through the state, assessing turns out to be about 60% of the resource used for domestic wells. And that's, as Dory said, 19 study units, it'll be about 1,000 wells, and that's scheduled. Those planned wells are scheduled to be finished next year. We right now are sampling in the Western Central Valley, and then there are 2 more study units indicated by the red circles that are next year. As part of the domestic studies, we expanded the program to things that were not included in the first round. We've made a big effort in the domestic studies, since they are based on lots and lots of one-on-one contact between USGS staff and well owners, to do outreach on products in both English and Spanish. And that's made a big difference in our ability to sample domestic wells in many places. In addition to water quality sampling, the domestic well program has had a big emphasis on water level measurement. And we've also incorporated compiling data from the DWR well completion reports, and then feeding that data back into the water board and back into the DWR Oscar system to improve locations and update some of the well construction information. In response to discussions in previous PAC meetings for the domestic well studies. We've also put a lot of attention into having more ways of presenting the results. So in addition to all the data being live on the, being available on the Water Board's Gamma GIS, we've also created our own data portal, which you can access through the website for viewing and downloading data. And we've put a lot of effort into changing the forms of publications we use. So in addition to traditional USGS printed publications, we're using USGS data releases, developing new fact sheets and story maps. And again, the website, which presents information in many different ways. And we've put a lot of effort into developing data exploration tools, one of which is the data download tool, and the others I will discuss in a few minutes. So the domestic well study, even though we're reaching the end of phase 2, is still in progress. So I don't have a statewide answer, but stay tuned. We have lots of reports coming out that present the results on the study unit level, and then we'll have a statewide summary when we're done. The second big question that we were trying to address in phase 2 is the quality of groundwater used for public supply changing? And we were using a two-pronged approach for that. One is our trends networks that Dory Supply described, where we have a network of about 400 public supply wells that we're sampling on a 5-year cycle. And these are being sampled for a comprehensive suite of constituents, including geochemical and age dating tracers. We're combining this data with a much larger data set compiled for the Division of Drinking Water Regulatory Compliance sampling, and have developed methods to quantify different types of water quality trends in the combined data set. And all of that information, in addition to being published in papers, is also on a web tool that you can access through the website to explore trends in public supply wells. And there's a new update coming out for that website in the next couple of weeks that will allow downloading data at the level of DWR basin size. So hopefully that'll make the data sets more useful for people. And we were able to answer this question. Yes, the quality of groundwater used for public supply is changing, and it's changing a lot. We've found that more than half the wells have trends, and those are either up or down. Not everything is getting higher concentrations everywhere. Nitrate is the most frequently measured constituent in the DDW data set, and is the one that we found that has the most trends. So you can see on the bar on the far left of the graph is nitrate. About 35% of public supply wells have a trend in nitrate, mostly up, but some of them down. It's a little harder to quantify trends for other constituents because they're monitored less frequently, so there's less data. But from what we can see, the number of wells with trends in salinity, total dissolved solids, and the constituents that make up TDS, almost as many as have trends in nitrate. And then there are also trends in a lot of the priority trace element constituents like fluoride and arsenic.
Miranda?
Yes.
Real quick, there's a question in the chat. Is it valuable to sample more frequently than 5 years for the trends?
Yes. So that's what we found, why it's important to be combining these two data sets, because we're sampling every 5 years for this very comprehensive sampling that includes all this other information that you need to actually understand what's going on with the trends. But 5 years wouldn't be enough. So in order to get this picture of how water quality is changing, we need to combine that data with other data, like so far the DDW data, and we have plans for pulling in other data sets to be able to look at more trends information. Yes, 5 years by itself isn't really enough to quantify trends.
Can I follow up with my question?
Sure.
So what I meant by that is, would annual or every 3 years of sampling be valuable? I don't know, with the frequency of the DDW sampling, but I know you need to sample for decades to really understand trends, but I was trying to think of a more granular or more frequent sampling would be of value.
Yeah, that's why it's going to be important to combine lots of data. So in the DDW, nitrate is actually sampled often. So there's often like annual or depending, and some water agencies sample way more often than that. So there could be nitrate that's monthly or seasonal. So there's a lot of data. But for some of the inorganic constituents, there's different types of public supply wells have different sampling frequency requirements. So sometimes there's data every 3 years. For non-community wells, there may only be one analysis. So yeah, the frequency at which you sample trends does make a difference in what kind of information you can get. But sampling is expensive, so you can't sample everything everywhere all the time. There have to be some prioritizations made. Phase 2 also included a question about, is the quality of groundwater used for domestic supply changing? For that, we set up a network that's similar to the network we set up for public supply, where we're sampling 20% of the original wells on a 5-year cycle. The domestic well original studies are still going on, so we've only started sampling these networks. And we have some work in progress now to compare trends in places where we've sampled for both domestic and public trends sampling with the fully comprehensive sampling that we've been doing. So that should be coming out soon. So a lot of the work we've been doing is related to these status and trends questions. What is the status of water quality and monitoring for how it's changing? But that's not all we've been doing. In USGS lingo, we've been doing what we're calling understanding assessments. And that is taking the data that have been collected for the status assessments and for the trends assessments and doing a lot more with it. Doing in-depth analysis of the isotope data, the groundwater age data, doing geochemical modeling, combining it with other types of data like water level data, and really digging in to understand what's going on that's affecting both the status of the water quality and the trends. So we've done lots of these understanding studies as part of phase 1 and 2. I'm going to give you 5 highlights of ones that we've done as part of phase 2. So first highlight, and again, there's a lot more detail on all of these on the website. So I'm just going to go through very quickly. Now running a little behind schedule here. We did a study looking closely at the relationship between water level change and nitrate concentration change in public supply wells in the Central Valley. And the take-home message is increased pumping during drought caused nitrate increases in public supply wells. So there's an overall change in the system towards lower water level, deepening water levels and higher nitrate, but superimposed on that, there are spikes in the nitrate concentrations during drought periods. And what our conceptual model for that is that during the drought periods, the drawdown in the system is pulling more of the shallower water into the deeper public supply wells. So it's essentially changing the mix of water in the wells in a transient way during the extra pumping and during drought. Example 2 is looking at outside of basins. So this is using the water quality data that were collected for the domestic well study, in this case in the Yuba and Bear watersheds in the Sierra Nevada, to provide some insight into water supply reliability for domestic wells in this area. This area is one of the hot spots in the state during the 2014 drought for wells going dry and needing to be deepened. And this is an area that's very highly reliant on domestic wells for rural water supply. So looking at the 25,000 domestic wells in the area over a 50-year period, there's a deepening of the wells as the water levels drop. And as more wells are put in, as the population increases and puts more stress on the resource. So what we did is we used the isotopic data and the noble gas data and the groundwater age dating data to determine, well, what is the source of recharge for these domestic wells? We found it's a mixture of hyperlocal recharge from precipitation and surface water from the very engineered, extensive distribution system in this part of the foothills, where surface water is moved around through canals and ditches and small reservoirs and used for residential and small scale irrigation. So being able to identify that the recharge to the wells is from these two sources is important information for making plans for how to manage groundwater to make sure that the wells are going to still have their recharge. It also relates into climate change because under drier conditions, the surface water provides a higher proportion of the recharge to the wells, which is great because it keeps the wells from going dry, but it has water quality implications because that water has a different composition. Example 3 is showing what we've been doing with groundwater age dating. We've been working statewide. We've done this synthesis of all the data we've collected in the Central Valley and have developed there's a tool for exploring this that you can access through the website. But the take-home message here is modern age groundwater is penetrating deeper into the Central Valley. And because of the type of groundwater age modeling we've been doing, we can look at the rate of that deepening. So the map on the left shows the depth at which modern water has penetrated, and the map on the right shows how much that depth has changed in 20 years. And this is a really important form of data analysis for addressing one of the priority issues, because we can use this kind of information to do regional scale prediction of the timing of water quality depth change in the water quality change with depth in the groundwater system. So we've done this for the Central Valley, but we've been collecting data statewide. So this is something that we would like to develop for other areas of the state. Fourth example, another San Joaquin Valley example. And this is a story that we started 10 years ago with uranium, and that is water use for irrigation changes the solubility of naturally occurring organics that are in the inorganics in the aquifer. So not only does use of water and irrigation potentially add things like nitrate from fertilizers and pesticides to the groundwater, it also fundamentally changes how the groundwater system works. And that in itself changes groundwater quality by mobilizing inorganic constituents that are naturally occurring. So in this case, plants produce bicarbonate, which increases the solubility of uranium. The uranium then moves down through the aquifer system due to recharge and pumping. The aquifer, the way groundwater flow moves in the Central Valley has changed through recharge and pumping, and there's now a much bigger vertical component. So anything that's happening in the shallow part moves through in the deeper part. The more recent study from the 2019 paper by Michael Rosen is there's an area of domestic wells that are in a part of the groundwater system that used to be a discharge zone. So it used to be primarily anoxic. And now with this change in how recharge works in the San Joaquin Valley, it's now there's oxic recharge water moving down and mobilizing more uranium above and beyond what's mobilized by the bicarbonate. There are domestic wells in this area that have, in the last 20 years, had their uranium increased by up to 100 micrograms per liter. And that's all moving down through the system. Because this is such an interesting area to work in, we've also looked at how this mechanism affects TDS. It increases TDS, and how it might also affect arsenic, since recharging oxic water into formerly anoxic zones may actually decrease arsenic. So not everything is a water quality getting worse story. The fifth example is PFAS, and I include this because everyone asks about PFAS, and that's been one of the high priority topics that's came up in the survey and has come up often. So one of the things that we added to the Gamma Priority Basin Project in 2019 was to sample for PFAS. So we're doing a 5-year cycle that will finish next year of analyzing PFAS on the entire 400 well trends network and in about 500 domestic wells. So that's all the domestic well studies we're doing during this time, plus the domestic well trends. And then, so we're almost done with that sampling, and we'll be producing a statewide synthesis report shortly after that. The preliminary results from that are that the PFAS detected in this ambient statistically representative sampling we're doing, it's less commonly detected than in the targeted sampling that's being done through DDW. And this is not a surprise. You'd expect you see more PFAS if you're sampling in places where they're known sources. But it is important to, in order to put the targeted sampling in context, to have a picture of what the ambient groundwater looks like. As part of this PFAS study, we're also collaborating with the USGS national team that's working on PFAS on a national model for prediction of PFAS occurrence in groundwater. And the California data is about half the data in that model. So we're, California will be well represented in the national model. So that's the 20 minute run through of 20 years of work. We've been focused on both the status of groundwater, the trends in groundwater, and then using the data collected from the status and trends study to understand what's going on, to explain the status and to understand why there are trends. As we move into the phase 3 part of Gamma, there are a couple considerations that I'm going to run through fairly quickly. One is we want to make sure that this program is meeting the needs of the state water boards and of the other stakeholders that the State Water Board is serving. So this is a discussion. This is a negotiation between us and the Water Board, and most importantly, all of you. We need to know, and the Water Board needs to know what's important to you in order to design this program in a way that works for everyone. So I'll mention a few of the priorities that are for the program. I'll give a brief introduction to our proposed direction, and I left a bullet off here. The bullet that's supposed to be on here is to set up some questions that we'll be discussing after the break, after my talk. So priorities relevant to Gamma. As Dory mentioned, Gamma still has an ongoing statewide monitoring mandate, and the Priority Basin Project is the means for doing that. So we will be in some form continuing statewide monitoring. Another big priority is coordination. There are lots of programs out there that collect or need groundwater quality data, and we want to make sure that the Priority Basin Project is fitting in and meshing with all those other programs. Two of the programs that jump to my mind as and have been really important in how we're doing design for phase 2 have been human right to water. So focus on information needed to ensure access to safe drinking water for everyone now and in the future. And in phase 2, that was part of the driver for phase 2, to look at domestic wells. Then, of course, there's Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and focus on information needs for local groundwater management. So what are we proposing? We're proposing that phase 3 focus on why is groundwater changing. So essentially expanding the understanding component that I discussed for phases 1 and 2. So looking at what are the processes causing groundwater quality change? Big ones being change in recharge. So change in recharge, either changing the chemistry, the location, the timing of recharge, all has big effect on groundwater quality. There's land use and water resource management changes, such as urbanization. That has a huge effect. You know, in places that have urbanized, we actually see trend reversals in things like nitrate. Water resource management changes, such as an expansion plan for managed aquifer recharge. And what do we do with all the floodwaters that are happening like this year? Hopefully there'll be more big water years like this year. How does that affect groundwater quality? Of course, there are changes in contaminant loading, both for new emerging contaminants like PFAS and for changes in regulatory processes that might change the loading of nitrate or the release of anthropogenic constituents at the surface. And all of these anthropogenic changes interact with the natural system. So the geologic conditions, the geochemical conditions, and hydrologic conditions, including climate change. So the example I gave you about the Yuba Bear watershed, there's a big climate change component in there that will change the source of recharge. The second big component of addressing this question of why is groundwater quality changing is looking at the timing and the magnitude of water quality change in resources used for drinking water. So that's expanding on, for example, expanding the work we've done to create the groundwater age model for the Central Valley and linking that to the water quality. In all of this, we want to make sure in this third phase that we're focusing on changes in water quality that would affect water supply reliability. So either reliability in terms of, is there going to be any water at all in the wells, like in the Yuba Bear example, and water supply reliability is closely linked to water quality, because even if you have water, if it's not the appropriate quality, you have a water supply reliability problem. And then there's the question of scale, which I'll return to on the next slide. So sorry I'm going fast here, but we're running behind schedule. I'm trying to get us a little bit back on schedule. So how are we going to do this? As I said before, we'd like to continue with these understanding studies, these topical and synthesis studies, focusing them on water supply reliability issues. We'd like to build on the science structures that we developed during phase 2 with some changes to refine the sampling. We've noticed with the domestic well study that we're only going to, with the way it's designed, only hit 60% of the resource. We're proposing to do a few more of the studies to get a few more areas that are high priority. We're looking at refining this 650 well trends network to a smaller core network to be more efficient. We'd like to incorporate more topical sampling into these trends and domestic well studies sampling that we've been doing. So continuing the statistically based design so that we can actually use the results in a statistically representative way, but add more to be able to address some of these specific questions. And we want to continue expanding our data infrastructure. So for example, we've developed infrastructure to incorporate the DDW data into our analysis and to incorporate data from the DWR well completion reports and incorporate water level modeling. We want to expand those efforts. As far as scale, we think staying at the scale that the program has been working so far is appropriate. So at the basin to sub-basin scale, or in areas outside of basins, Huck 8 watershed scale, for those of you who are in on the lingo for those. There are other programs that are working at smaller scales, and we think given the resources that we have, staying at these larger scales is what would be appropriate. But again, open for discussion. So now a little bit of reality here, funding. As Dory said, the plans for the funding through the phase 1 of the program was funded by Proposition 50 bond funding. And as that went away, we transitioned over to funding through the waste discharge permit fee program. And we've been very encouraged that the program has maintained a commitment to GAMA and is planning on having continuing funding in the program at current levels. So that's the red line here. However, as Dory said, there's inflation, and level funding is not level program because of inflation. And we are looking at needing to reduce the scope of the program in order to stay within the funding. The funding from the USGS is predicted to be level. The USGS cooperative matching funds come from Congress. So the amount of these funds are designed to help the USGS work with state, local, and tribal agencies on water quality programs. Unfortunately, that funding has remained level for decades. So the amount that we can allocate to this program is not anticipated to increase. So how are we going to do this? Well, right now, we're allocating about 65% of the funds for the program to sampling, both in the trends and the domestic status sampling, and about 35% of the funds to everything else, which would be reports from the domestic well study units, these synthesis and understanding studies, like the 5 examples I showed you, web tools, presentation of information in multiple different ways. What we're proposing to do is to increase the amount of data analysis to address priority questions. So increase these understanding components, increase tool development and communication of results so that we can make the data more useful to stakeholders. And to pay for that, to reduce the amount of sampling that's done by the USGS. We think that we can compensate for this sum by the fact that we're going to be expanding incorporation of other data into the program. But this still is a change because the sampling we're doing is not the same as the sampling the other programs are doing, because our program is fully comprehensive sampling, full water quality, isotopes, age dating tracers. So there will be less of that data available when we make this change. So the last thing I want to leave you with here is to seed some questions for the discussion that Dory will be facilitating about to get feedback from the PAC and from other stakeholders and members of the public who have joined the meeting. The questions that I'd like to seed the discussion with are, is this focus on groundwater quality change and water supply reliability in line with the priorities of stakeholders? And through our discussions with stakeholders and through the responses that Dory's already received on the survey, we've gotten lots of recommendations about priorities for specific places and constituents and topical questions. So really looking forward to more discussion about that. And then the second question is there anything that the program should not be doing? It's really important that the Priority Basin Project complement other programs and not duplicate what other programs are doing. In particular, we're very concerned that we don't want to be stepping on the toes of what the SGMA groundwater sustainability agencies are doing. So we're very interested to hear on what we should be doing that complements that work, but doesn't duplicate it or step on the toes of that work or interfere with it in any way. And then, of course, everything's expensive. Should the Priority Basin Project be looking for other sources of funding to augment the program? And any ideas about that, we'd love to hear, and I'm sure the Water Board would love to hear. So with that,
thank you,
I will, the best way to reach me is by email. If you have questions that don't get addressed today, definitely send me an email, and I definitely welcome having more dialogue with you about anything that we've covered today and anything that you think of as you're thinking about what we've said and what you can see on our website. So I'll turn it back over to Dory.
Thank you so much, Miranda. Great presentation. The plan from here, going off of the agenda, is to take a short 15-minute break. Let's come back here at 11:35. And when we come back, we'll be going over those discussion questions that Miranda just showed us on our last slide. So again, if you have continued questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and we will come back here at 11:35. Right? Thank you very much. We'll get started in just a minute. Everybody return from break. Okay, well, it is 11:35. We'll go ahead and resume the meeting. I want to thank Miranda again for an excellent presentation. She left off on a question slide. I do have a copy of that. I can share that. I'd like to start our discussion kind of centered around those questions. Of course, we welcome any comments whatsoever, but I'm going to share that last slide that she gave to us and kind of open it up. Of course, PAC members, we really want to know your feedback, but everyone's feedback is welcome. First question being, is focus on groundwater quality change and water supply reliability in line with the state priorities? Recommendations of priorities for places, constituents, topical questions, etc. So based upon everything that you've heard between our two presentations about what we've done and kind of the transition that we're in right now into the third phase, what do you see as far as prioritizing or what your priorities are for moving forward? I'd like to open that up. If anybody would like to raise their hand on the Zoom platform, that'd be an easy way to call on people. Don't forget that you are muted, so you'll have to physically unmute through the Zoom platform so we can hear you. We welcome your video, but that's completely up to you. Is anyone else seeing any hands up? I don't see any right now. It's not just me. Are there any questions so far on what you've seen in our presentations? Any comments about what you'd like to see? John, want to go ahead?
Sure, thanks. I guess on the first question, I think in talking with others at CWC here, I think the focus on groundwater quality change and understanding what processes are driving that would we see that as being something really helpful. I think a couple things that come to mind related to our work. We're doing a point of entry 123 TCP treatment pilot with domestic households in the Central Coast. And as part of that pilot, you know, we used some regional water board groundwater domestic well testing data to identify households that we thought that had 123 TCP in their sampling. And then as part of the pilot, we've been doing quarterly sampling of the wells since then for about 2 years of several wells. And basically we see that the TCP comes and goes. It's non-detect, and then, you know, a quarter later, it might be 10 times the MCL. And that fluctuation is, I mean, it's really relevant to a domestic well owner trying to understand whether their water is safe to drink. And I think anything this trend analysis could do in trying to understand those processes and what's driving it would be really helpful. I think another thing that comes up in our work is looking at groundwater sustainability plans that the GSAs are coming up with. It's the GSA's responsibility to make sure that their management doesn't detrimentally impact water quality in the basin, right? But their management has certain limitations, like they don't focus on nitrate application, for instance. They focus on more quantity and pumping and those things. And when groundwater quality changes, then we need to understand, well, is that driven by pumping or is that driven by application, and what are the mechanisms, so we make sure that the groundwater management practices aren't detrimental to quality. So the more we can understand that, the better the GSAs are going to be able to manage the basins. So appreciate this focus overall.
No, thank you for your comment. So assessing these changes, how they affect certain constituents, and then providing those tools so audiences like GSAs can use these assessments and results would be much your comment. And and that you're in agreement with looking at drivers of groundwater quality change as our next phase being a good one.
Yeah, and I think specifically 123 TCP would be something I think would be interesting, seeing it as kind of an emerging contaminant. We see this variability, and it's a contaminant. It's a concern at really low concentrations, which I think makes it relevant.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'll add just a little response to that. The observation of seeing changes of the TCP coming and going on a quarterly basis is a really important point. One of the unknowns out there on groundwater quality is what are all the timescales over which groundwater quality changes. So you're seeing quarterly changes. If they're quarterly changes, how do you see that if you're doing 5-year sampling or 1-year sampling? So one of the ideas that the USGS NAQUA program did some studies on in their last phase was looking at that issue of what is the time scale over groundwater quality changing, and instrumenting some wells for doing real-time data and then doing quarterly sampling and seeing what all the different time scales were. We've rolled around that idea about doing a pilot of looking at that timescale issue in domestic wells. So it's certainly one of the things, one of the possibilities that we could discuss with the water board about that could be one of these studies that we do as part of phase 3, is to pick a place to look at exactly that issue.
Thank you, Miranda. Do it to me.
Yeah, I do have a few comments. Thank you both for your presentation earlier. So my comment will be on the second bullet point. Is there anything that Gamma PBP should not be doing? I would say, is there anything that it should be doing? I'll sort of rephrase that question that way. And one of them is, so at Clean Water Action and also CWC, we work on the CV Salts program that it's the nitrate control program under the CV Salts program. It's actually testing for nitrates right now. They are doing door-to-door outreach, some of them, and then actually going in and testing wells for nitrate contamination. They're currently focused on nitrate, but we've gotten some of them to test for other contaminants. So is it possible for us to work alongside smaller programs like that? They're currently testing, I think, only 6 regions, only 6 groundwater basins. And then on the SGMA question, is it also possible to work with groundwater sustainability agencies? So my organization, we reviewed all the groundwater sustainability plans that were submitted. And across board, we found that groundwater quality was not sufficiently considered by most of the groundwater sustainability plans. So can we work with these agencies, you know, in terms of like data? So I would say CV Salts and SGMA.
So your question is if we could work with those groups?
Yeah, I have coordination. Is it possible to coordinate with these groups?
It is possible to coordinate with those groups. Coordinating with them throughout our programs, not necessarily to affect their policy, but to provide them the kind of tools that they would need to get their jobs done, to provide the information that they would need, is definitely something that is a focus of the Gamma program.
If I could add to that too, Dory, something to think about would be, you know, making sure that that groundwater quality data that you guys sample makes it back into our Gamma system so we can all reference it. And I think that would be a good way of maybe not, you know, directly working with you know, our stakeholders, but indirectly, you know, leveraging that groundwater quality data. So I know that'd be my, you know, first initial recommendation, but thanks for your comment, question.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Dory?
Yes.
Can you hear me? This is Roger.
Yes.
Yeah. Real quickly, to kind of address one, they were talking about what direction, you know, we might be going as we move forward. one of the things I'd like to do is put a pitch in a little bit for the shallow aquifer assessment program. The data collected from that is extremely important to supply users that overlie it and use it, and the oversight agencies that kind of keep charge of them. But just as important, if not even more important, is the insight or the window into the intermediate and deeper zone quality that probably isn't going to occur for many years down the road. And the third probably is that perhaps we get a chance to see if there are any mitigation programs that are feasible. The shallow aquifer provides us with those, I guess, blessings if we monitor it and continue to monitor it. This, in my mind, is really important because California is facing a lot of challenges after years of drought, and then a very, very heavy rain and snow period, a lot of flooding that has taken place throughout the state. And we've got a lot of land under water right now that was farmland, agricultural land, and so on. And so I think those shallow aquifers are going to see the result of all of that. So I guess I would put in a pitch for the board to maintain a very active priority for the for the shallow aquifer assessment program and keep it a major part of the basin program and GAMA as a whole as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Definitely moving forward with some sort of trends component for the shallow aquifer assessments. But also we have the options of kind of filling data gaps where we haven't been. So that's definitely a road that we are open to going down. And then, of course, applying some of these questions to these areas, especially on the shallow aquifer zone, would be definitely a path that we would move forward on. Thank you, Roger. I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, and I will also contact Miranda or you by email with the possibility of at least of some funding direction, but I've been away from that for a while, but I do have a couple of ideas and I'll pass them on to you directly.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Paul, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. By way of clarification, the data reported with relatively rapid changes in some of the sampling data, was that only data from shallow aquifers, or were there some deep aquifers that also reflected this rapid change?
Speaking of what Community Water Center was speaking of, or just generally throughout what we found in the program?
Yeah, generally in the program sampling, where you did see significant short-term changes.
Miranda, did you want to try that question? Yeah, no, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I guess what I'm thinking is I from the limited knowledge I have in geology, I wouldn't expect particularly a deep aquifer to have short-term changes. So that's why I'm asking if some of those changes were observed at deep aquifers or just shallow aquifers.
Well, there are a couple of variables. There's deep aquifers, shallow aquifers, and what kind of well is doing this sampling. A lot of the wells that we have to access the deeper aquifers are the public supply wells that tend to integrate a larger space in the aquifer because they're longer screen wells, they pump more, so they're integrating more. So yeah, I would be very surprised if the samples that we are able to get of the deeper aquifer would have that level of variability. In the shallow aquifer, with domestic wells and monitoring wells, you're often dealing with a well that's sampling a much smaller window in the system. So yeah, you can get a lot of variability on a short time scale. And I think Zeno has more of an answer to that question. I see his hand raised.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I do want to make the point that I'm not sure exactly what you were referring to in the presentation, but if you were referring to the nitrate increases during drought, those can be quite dramatic. 2, 3, 4, 5 parts per million over the course of seasonal to year scale. And this is due to in the deep aquifer. And so what we found in that paper and what we continue to find is that the deep aquifer can have huge changes due to hydraulic perturbance of the system due to pumping and well operation. So we think intra-borehole flow plays a large part in this during times of massive head loss in the system. Wells, when they're not operated, become direct conduits into the deep aquifer, and these are causing changes in other constituents too that we're very interested in continuing to look at.
If I might be allowed another question, black swans, the concept is something near and dear to my heart. When I teach my project management class, it's a very important thing, and a lot of people have trouble understanding the concept. But it's extremely important when there have been very significant events. Oftentimes it's because they're black swans, including climate events. I'm just curious as to what if you can articulate it, what the framework is for trying to identify black swans, and particularly in the context of climate change.
I can see definitely the area of filling data gaps, increased sampling, probably seasonally, temporal change, looking at more of a focused area that we do see some signs or precursors of quick changes like that. In either resource of a groundwater resource, or any depth of the groundwater resource would be something that we could definitely look into.
It's interesting when I read the black swan point in the survey, I actually had a different interpretation of what it meant. What I thought it meant was black swans are the things that you don't expect, and that one of the things that we've done throughout the history of the GAMA program is, because we're doing this comprehensive sampling and because we're doing a lot of just kind of looking at big data sets and exploring them, we find things that aren't necessarily a narrow question that the study was designed to look at. Because one of the things that's come up in our discussions with the Water Board about how to design this program is how to make it actionable science, how to make it local and actionable, and there's this specific question, design a study to get the answer. And as a researcher, I kind of look at it and think, oh, well, what about the black swans? What about the things that we didn't know about before we started? And the only reason we're finding them is because we're doing a lot of data exploration. So the uranium story that I mentioned, that was what I'm calling a black swan. We didn't have a study. There was no contract line item that said, do a study on uranium to look at trends. It was, we're looking at it, we're looking at the data, we saw something unexpected, and then did a deep dive to explore the processes to explain it. So that's what I thought you meant when you said black swans in the survey. Now that I know that what you meant were one-time big events like this year's flood, I'll have to think about that, about how to answer that. It's it's very difficult to do a groundwater monitoring program to catch black swans because of the great, which well do you monitor? If you monitor the one over here, you've missed it. It's, and the expense of doing very dense, spatially extensive and temporally detailed monitoring networks. So I have to think about an answer to the black swans.
Sorry, we have a comment in the chat. The GAMA program has done a great job of providing snapshots and trends in water quality and aquifer systems statewide, noting that there are a large number of managed aquifer recharge projects planned in the Sigma GSPs, which will increase potential water quality changes in aquifer systems. Should the state and advisory panel consider the following? 1, setting up some flexible standards for MAR project water quality sampling and reporting. 2, consider a technical coordinating group to track Sigma MAR projects and water quality.
Thank you, Emily. You know,
hey, this is Tim Parker. That's my my quest, or actually my comment. If I could expand on that a little bit.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, and apologies, I'm sitting in an airport lounge in Canada, so hopefully it's no background noise. And just a little background on me, I'm a hydrogeologist and I testified on AB 599. So I've been a supporter of this whole program for a while. And I really appreciate the work that's been done. And I just wanted to expand by saying, I hope everybody's had a chance to look at the water supply strategy that the governor put out, or the administration put out last year, and the different aspects of that. And that, I think, is where some of the water quality change sampling could focus. Recharge is a big one, and that's a huge focus of the Department of Water Resources and the state board now to help streamline projects, right? And those are where we're going to see some water quality, potential water quality changes. Some are going to be, beneficial. Some may be negative, and it's going to affect a lot of the shallow aquifers, but also some of the deep where they're doing aquifer storage and recovery. So I just thought, how do we capture that and focus on, focusing on water quality changes in the future as these things roll out over the next few years and maybe longer. So that was just some thoughts I'd pass along. Thanks.
No, I appreciate that, Tim. Thank you. We certainly do have staff at the Water Board that are working on the water supply strategy by the governor. And that's definitely a coordination that we can establish for things that we could possibly work on in the GAMA program. We haven't really provided an advisory panel for certain groundwater issues in the GAMA program because we haven't really been tasked to do so. But recharge projects are certainly on our list of projects that we would like to move into. We know that this is a huge issue in groundwater right now, and something that we can, we have a lot of questions to answer. So we'll definitely be moving in the recharge direction as far as one of our projects and one of our focus areas. And we could certainly look into the water supply strategy and how we can kind of include those priorities that are within that plan as well. I wanted to make sure that we opened the floor to the other questions that are here on the slide. As others have mentioned, the second question, is there anything that we should not be doing? Meaning, where is it least helpful for us to do certain studies, or what groundwater issues are already being covered, comprehensively, or the opposite of that, what is most helpful for the GAMA program to be doing, or where? And then the last question, should we be looking for other sources of funding to augment the program? We've had others, like Roger mentioned, that he has some certain ideas. Those are always welcome, of course. But I want to open the floor to all of the questions if anybody has any comments that they would like to add. We especially want to hear from certain fee payers that maybe on the PAC or in the background that would like to add to this second question's specifically.
Sorry, this is Roger.
Hi, Roger.
Yeah, I can't do anything but just commend the work that the state board and USGS and Livermore and others have done in this program to keep it up on the front burner and to keep it as a major portion of California's ability to manage its groundwater quality. You've done a fantastic job, and I've been trying to follow it over the years, and it's been really an excellent program, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for mentioning that. You've always been a huge supporter of the program. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. I don't see any, in what I've been reviewing, I try to figure out, are there areas where we, perhaps are double dipping somewhere or providing information that's being done in some other venue, but I really don't see that much at all, if at all. And so I can't see parts of the program that either should be deleted or not moved forward.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. That's very helpful information. Thank you. Do you have any other comments at all about all of the questions you see on your screen? Hey, Paul.
Hi, sorry, and perhaps it's my lack of complete knowledge of the program, but to what extent is this tremendous data collection effort, and I too compliment the program. What you all have done is great, and I see some really smart ideas in how you've gone about executing the program, which it's really nice to see. I'm just want to get some clarification to what extent all this data might be or is being or has been used to develop a predictive program or forecasting program, perhaps.
We certainly, and maybe Miranda can expand on this, but we certainly have some some ideas of projects that we could start on in the next phase that do some bit of predictive modeling, contaminants, where we see them, at what depths. I don't know if anybody wants to add to those, but that's definitely something that we see on the horizon on this next phase.
Yeah, there are a couple of different kinds of predictive modeling. One is directly from the groundwater age dating modeling, because the groundwater age dating modeling allows for this predicting of how the water being tapped by the well is going to change with time, how the groundwater age structure moves down through the system. It's very well set up for doing predictive modeling of as you change the mixture of water in the well, how's the water quality going to change? Bryant has done work directly on that in his work with the NAQUA program before he was working with Gamma 100% of the time, and has used the groundwater age modeling to do predictive to the level of, if you change the nitrate input at the land surface, when are you going to see that change in the well? And that he's done on a well by well basis. We're now set up to do that on a more regional basis with the work that he and Kirsten Faulkner have done to do the regional level groundwater age modeling. There are other types of predictive modeling. So again, in working with the NAQUA program, there are machine learning predictive models, or predicting in space of what nitrate concentrations are, or what arsenic, or let's say they've also looked at DO and manganese, of doing like a wall-to-wall prediction for the Central Valley of what the concentrations are. We're collaborating with the NACWA program right now to look at how to incorporate time into machine learning predictive modeling. Don't know yet whether it's going to work, but it is something on the horizon. And looks like Neil has a question, and I know he's thought about this, so
yeah,
pass it to Neil.
Hey, I assume I'm unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, for many of you probably, some of you have met me, most of you never met me, but I've been involved in this literally since day one, and have watched the geochemistry and groundwater science evolve in the Central Valley since 1986. I was going to embellish on Miranda's statement, but I think she actually covered all the bases. And I gave a presentation to the government of Uzbekistan last night using examples from NACWA and the Central Valley that were done by Gamma and USGS, because the predictive modeling is getting very close to a real reality. And I like the term that you, Ken Belitz or Miranda, have been using in their presentations. They're meta models. So Claudia Font does a model of the flow system. Understanding the flow system, so a basic thing is understanding the flow system and understanding the quality are not two separate questions. They are absolutely one question. Understanding the flow system enhances your ability to understand why the contaminant is where it is and how long it will persist and predict that. Understanding the geochemical tracers tells you an awful lot about the groundwater flow dynamics you cannot access any other way. So the meta modeling, again, using the example of Claudia's model, Tom Nolan took the velocity vectors, the downward vertical velocity vectors from Claudia's model and imported it to a predictive model for nitrate. So now you're driving the nitrate occurrence with the output of a model of groundwater velocities. So the other side, to bring in the chemical process side to that physical side is, as Miranda said, the modeling of DO, redox conditions, redox status, pH, the chemical what we call master variables. So then you couple the descriptors of the susceptibility from the chemical standpoint of transport. And that governs arsenic mobility, uranium mobility, nitrate mobility. It's critical in all those sectors, unless you're just talking about an utterly conservative constituent. So when you model the master chemical variables and you model the flow field and you bring them both together in a statistical machine learning model, now you have the best opportunity for prediction that you can get. And again, it benefits the first question, focus on reliability and quality change. They're inseparable in my mind. So again, I just think the program is absolutely on the right track. And understanding that, as Miranda pointed out, you don't necessarily know. I didn't see a single person mention MTBE in the concerns list. At the beginning of the program in 2000, that was the frenzy, was what we're just going to be overwhelmed by MTBE. It's no longer a problem, but nobody had mentioned PFAS. In 5 years, you may decide that PFAS was, a transient issue. But if you understand the flow field and understand the chemical processes, you'll be prepared to address the next question. That's all.
Thank you, Neil. Well, they're very important points. I appreciate that. I also want to add that, we're working with UC Davis to develop a tool that looks at, and maybe you've heard of it, it's the non-point source assessment tool, or NPSAT, where they've been working with and coordinating with a lot of different groups on developing these streamlines and other predictive models to assess how changes in loading will affect the water quality that you see in a specific well, mostly in the Central Valley. So we do have some exciting things coming on the horizon on that front as well, that augments the work that the USGS is doing as well. So we have some other programs and projects that are exciting along that front too.
Okay, Dory, we have 2 more comments in the chat. So Bruce says that he had to drop off, but he wanted to echo others that this information is very valuable. Looks forward to looking at the website and would encourage us to elbow our way into the various regional water quality boards to provide them with this information, especially key staff, since so much of the irrigated lands program is background water quality. USGS information is valuable in predicting where to focus management actions.
Okay.
And then the other comment is for bullet point 3. Has the program looked to federal funding to augment the program? Some of the federal funding has focused on environmental justice programs.
To answer that question, not necessarily. No. But it's something we should, we can definitely look into. I appreciate that contribution.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet, looking at other sources of federal funding. That's definitely something I can bring to my senior management, who would be the ones who would have access to the people who would be able to answer that question. So yeah, that's a great idea.
Thank you, Miranda. I'm going to put a general poll into the chat. It's a basic yes or no. The things that we've discussed today, kind of moving in this direction of assessing drivers that cause groundwater change. If this is something you'd like to see us move forward with, and you like what you've heard today, or if it's something that you don't necessarily agree with, and it shouldn't be a priority of the GAMA program or part of our mandates. And if you'd like to explain that, you can do so in the chat, or you can email me or the gamma@waterboards.ca.gov email address. I'm just going to drop this in the chat just to get a general idea. If you guys could answer that before you leave, that would be really helpful. If there's anything else, do we have any other comments? Oh, John, yes, please.
Yeah, thanks. I just had a couple follow-up comments. I think one to follow up on what said about other sampling that's going on, like nitrate sampling by the management zones, for instance. I think we do a lot of domestic well sampling at Community Water Center, and I think come to find that a lot of the work is reaching out to folks, getting that appointment set up, getting out there. So any way that, don't have one person coming out and sampling for nitrate and then another person coming out and sampling for other things. And that could be a way to really find efficiency. I imagine it's hard to combine funding sources or whatever, but if the GAMA program can kick in to analyze more contaminants, I think that could be really helpful. I think another thing is anything we can do to make it easier for organizations or encourage organizations to upload data to GAMA, so that the sampling that's already happening is uploaded. I think that's something we're trying to get better at it at CWC, like this TCP pilot, right? We should be working on getting all of that data up on GAMA. I think one other thought, I guess, back to Paul's question, I guess, about is it shallow aquifer or deep aquifer? And I think these domestic wells are definitely in shallow aquifers, and that's something we wonder about. I think like what you mentioned, Miranda, is, or how much of this is driven by nearby pumping and that sort of thing. And also it depends on what is the well that you're sampling, like how deep is it, where is it screened, and all of that. And I think we find that the intention of DWR's Oscar tool to have all those well completion reports publicly available is going to be really helpful. I think we find that there's more that can be done probably to make that system more complete and kind of clean up the data there. And I don't know if that's within GAMA's purview or somewhere else, but I think that could really help us understand the water quality data that we're getting. And yeah, and I guess I also know the state board and DWR are working on improving wells, or kind of updating the well construction standards, and part of that is going to be getting those reports up there, so that'll be important. But anything that can be done in the meantime too, I think would be really helpful.
News on that front.
That is in the purview. We're working with Dory right now. We've been going through each one of these domestic well studies that we do a review of all of the domestic well completion reports in the area, and have been compiling and QCing the Oscar information. So compiling some fields that aren't in Oscar and then QCing what was in Oscar and then refining locations. And we've been feeding that back to Oscar, but right now we're working with Dory to create a water board portal for the data that we've been collecting. So that should be coming soon.
Yeah, and that's announced on our online tools page. And I suspect that by the end of the summer, we will have that tool up and running, maybe even sooner, with the latest data from what they've been doing to digitize and attribute all of that data from the well completion reports. So you'll be able to access those through that web tool. The other thing I wanted to mention from John's comments are, two things with the data that we can get into the Gamma information system. One is we do have a new tool that a lot of users can use to submit data. It's called the data connection tool, and it is currently up. It's linked from our webpage for the Gamma GIS, just through the waterboards.ci.gov website. And there is provided a template for a table for you to upload that data, and then a way to upload the lab report PDF that you have for those results. And we'd be able to standardize that and get it in with the rest of the data that's provided. And a lot of I would say some of the challenges that we have for existing data sets, like maybe those that are required through LRP or CV salts, is making sure that we do have that XY, the location for those, because it's not always required in those programs. When we don't have the XY, it doesn't get into our system. So making sure that we have the lat and long for all of that data is extremely important. Paul, did you have your hand up again?
Yeah, just to offer a little perspective, because I've had a bit of a long career. And when I started, there were very few people that knew what MTBE was. And then some years later, people started to get educated about ammonium perchlorate and, more recently PFAs. And I'm always asking the question, what's the next chemical that we don't know about yet that maybe, on our desk as a prominent contaminant, and up to now, nobody's thought about it. So that's just some little perspective.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Aaron, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate. I mean, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Anytime we can get groundwater quality data from other groups is a benefit for everybody. People utilize our system a lot, especially in these Sigma reports. I'm sure Miranda, would be more than happy to see some other data, new data coming in. So Dory's right. Reach out to us, especially you, Community Water Center, other groups. We can help you get that data in. It's relatively straightforward. We still have some bugs to work out. It's pretty new, but I have kind of a staff dedicated to assisting you guys in doing that. So we have the time. And then, another good point she mentioned was regarding the IRLP data. Sometimes that data goes in and we don't really know about it. And so if there's any data you're not seeing in the Gamma information system, make sure you reach out to us and let us know so we can go back and make sure that those are all mapped over and showing correctly. Because sometimes it's just an issue of us not being aware of it and not making those connections on the back end. So by all means, feel, it's an open communication, reach out to any of us and my team will, get that up and running. There's been so many times when there have been thousands of wells in the Central Valley have been sampled and it wasn't showing up in the system because it was a really simple fix on our end. So please reach out. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
No, thank you, Aaron. Very good points.
Dory?
Yes.
This is Roger. Thank you and Miranda for a very, very informative program. It was really good, and I've come away with a lot. So thanks for that. And I've got to take off and go. And special thanks for the people that are in the room there that are working, and all the others that are working on this program to keep it up front. It's so important to the state of California and to our water supplies. So with that, I've got to go. Thank you.
I'm so glad you could join us today. Thank you for those comments, and let's touch base. Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments? I want to make sure. It looks like we've got a little less than half of answers to the poll. If you don't mind just jumping on that real quick before you leave at some point today, that would be, you know, some helpful information to get from everyone today. Do we have any parting words from, you know, please keep raising your hand if you have more comments, but are there, is there additional information, Miranda, or anybody from USGS that you would like to ask of everyone here, or anyone from the state board management? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Real quick, there was another comment in the chat from Gail. She also had to drop off, but she wanted to ditto Bruce's comments, especially with regards to the IRLP, and thank everyone for your hard work on this.
Perfect, thank you.
Real quick too, to kind of circle back, I know Larry mentioned, you know, water recharge issues and working through DWR. And so I've been hearing people talking about this. And so, and I think I've mentioned it to this group offline, but we are aware, you know, of these recharge projects, and DWR is kind of, I don't know where the project is exactly, but they have been, you know, talking with us offline about possibly looking, you know, to at least establish a baseline on where things are at, and then possibly looking at some of the effects on a small scale. And so people are talking about it, and then, you know, I'm all for it too. And I know Miranda and Dory know that, and I think they're probably on the same page too. So we are, you know, everybody's kind of in the loop, and it's starting. So we'll see where it goes to that point.
Yeah, thank you. Annalisa, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it seems like the meeting is kind of coming to a close, and hopefully you can hear me okay. I think I had an issue with my mic. First comment, as Aaron was mentioning, as part of the water supply strategy, we do have a working group that coordinates often with members from Department of Water Resources, just kind of recognizing that there's an overlap with a lot of the work that the water boards are doing, implementing the water supply strategy, as well as water resources. And so part of those conversations kind of led into this larger question that we're getting about DWR and their LandFlex program in terms of promoting more recharge and how that affects water quality, especially in these areas. So Aaron and his team have been, you know, coordinating and have an ongoing dialogue with DWR on that to help answer that question. And then second point, I just want to thank the PAC, very, very thoughtful responses to the survey. Really appreciate the input that I'm hearing as well as seeing in the chat. And then I do really appreciate all of the great feedback, because, you know, collectively we're bringing that all together. And then we have reached out to our regional boards as well, recognizing that there is an overlap to a lot of the work that they're doing at a region-wide basis and on a basin. And have asked them to answer the same questions that we've asked as part of the survey, so we can get an understanding in terms of our regional board regulatory staff, what their priorities are and how we can support them. And so that'll be part of those lines of evidence that we would consider in terms of updates to the scope of work for the new contracts. So huge thanks there. And then Miranda and Dory, great job setting up for this meeting. The presentation was really great. And then thank you for the facilitation to get such great feedback from the group.
Thank you. Thank you, Annalisa. I appreciate that. I want to make sure that we provide one last opportunity if there are any additional comments that you would like to express before we end the meeting. We'll get to end a little bit early, about a half an hour early. Please, before you leave, stop by the poll. That would be super helpful, just to have your feedback if you weren't able to speak today or just didn't really want to. Which is perfectly fine. I want to thank all my coworkers in the background, not only at the USGS that are here and helping answer these questions and working on all of this very important work, but also over at the State Water Board currently in this meeting that are in the background answering chat questions and making sure everything runs smoothly in the background. Thank you so much. That's Emily Houlihan, and Haugen, Carlotta, and Richard. Thank you so much for your help today. I really appreciate it. And also to our management for being here today. It's great to have you all here and to be supported by you. Miranda, did you have any parting words before we ended the meeting?
Thank you all for your time in listening and in giving feedback, both in the meeting and in the survey. As Dory said, we'll be putting it all together and incorporating it into the agreement that Dory and I will hopefully be putting together over the next couple of weeks so we can get it into the state board contracting system. So we're excited about phase 3.
Definitely. Thank you guys very much. We have no other comments. We will end the meeting, but stop by the poll. I'll leave the meeting going for the next few minutes to see if those numbers do rise. And again, thank you very much. We had a great turnout today. I appreciate everyone's comments, everyone's attendance. Please reach out to me or Miranda to the gamma@waterboards.ca.gov email address. Any way you'd like to reach out to us, we are here to take comments, not just here at this PAC meeting, but continuously throughout the program. So we really appreciate your comments. Make a big difference in where we go and what we sample and how we go forward in the program. So I wanted to give you guys a huge thank you. Thank you for being here. All right, go ahead and feel free to log off whenever you're ready and make sure you stop by that poll, okay? Thank you guys very much.
Hey, Dory.
Yes.
I want to make sure I saw that one last comment. If you guys grab that, or we got a priority for the San Francisco Bay region, didn't hear information about. It looks like
From David?
Yep.
I'll grab that right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, I saw it pop in right at the last little bit.
Get it.
All right, guys. Well, good job. I'm gonna go ahead and hop off, but we'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Hey, guys.
I'll end this meeting in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Talk to you guys in a bit.
All right. See you later.